This is the video you need to watch to prepare yourself for the bananas housing market here in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. Hey everyone, I'm Nick Sundahl with Acta Homes, and this is Minneapolis Living. If this is your first time here, well, I make videos about living here in the Twin Cities, the pros, the cons, community tours, things like that. I also help people buy and sell residential real estate. So if that's the content you're looking for, you know the drill. You gotta subscribe. Today's topic is about the bananas real estate market that we're seeing here in the Twin Cities greater metro area. And it's really seen through the lens of a multiple offer situation, because the majority of the homes that are hitting the market are going into multiple offers. As a matter of fact, there are some agents that are calling for highest and best, assuming that there are going to be multiple offers. They haven't even put it on the market yet. They just assume that that's what's going to happen. So you have to be prepared to really fight. And hopefully there are some tips in here that will help you compete and maybe even win. So let's get to it. The median sale price in the Twin Cities has grown to $330,000 for a single family home. That's up 10% over the last year and 25% over the last 5 years. And there's a couple of reasons for it. One is a lack of inventory. A lot of people continue to stay in the homes that they have and not move up because there isn't anything out there. And builders aren't building at the same rate for new construction. They've actually been lagging quite a bit over the last decade. You compound that with the largest group of people we've ever had in terms of a generation, the millennials, that are finding themselves with incredibly great rates for buying homes. So you've got all these people, wonderful rates. As a matter of fact, we hit record lows 14 times in 2020. So you've got all these people, the great rates, lack of inventory, and prices continue to climb. So it's no surprise that we're getting into multiple offer situation. And that leads me to my first topic, and that's price. And usually that's the most important thing to a seller. They want to sell their house for the most money they can. And you have to be prepared to give it to them because we're in that big of a competition. So there are a couple things you can do. My first recommendation, go to the highest number that you can. Whereas if you got beat out, you'd be okay losing out on the home. So for example, if there was a home that came on the market for $350,000 and you wrote an offer for $370,000 and you lost to $371,000, would you be okay? If not, you need to go higher than that. Now there's a little thing out there called an escalation clause. I get asked about this quite often, as a matter of fact. One, I'm going to tell you, I don't really care for them, but here's what an escalation clause is. Essentially what you're telling the seller is, I will beat out any offer by X amount, let's say $1,000, up to a certain number. So for example, in that $350,000 example, if you wrote for $370,000, but then you had the escalation clause saying you'd beat the next best offer by $1,000 up to say $380,000, right? So you can essentially write the offer for whatever you want. Escalation clause just says, I'm going to beat your next best offer by whatever. I don't like these offers because they're too ambiguous. And I'm not a lawyer, so I don't really know how to write the language in a way that not only protects you, but in a way protects me from being sued if something doesn't go the right way down the road. Yeah, it's a little selfish, but it's also not in your best interests. So I don't like them, but I have seen them. They are getting used quite a bit. But my suggestion is just write the best possible financial commitment that you can. The next topic is the loan type. Now, first and foremost, if you have the means to pay cash for a property, I suggest you do it. One, there are no appraisals that come with cash. Two, cash means you can close fast. Sellers love cash, but most people can't. So you've got FHA, VA, and conventional. FHA and VA are both federally backed guaranteed loans, and they have a couple extra things that come with them. So you might be best served using a conventional loan. The misnomer here is that you need 20% down to do conventional, and that's not true. Actually, there are conventional loans that I've seen as low as 3%. So you might want to look at conventional loans because they come with less strings attached to them when you're making your offer. Now, that being said, just because you're using FHA or VA doesn't mean you can't win a multiple bid situation. It just means that there are a few extra things that come with them, and a seller might not be open to accepting those things that come along with those particular loans, such as appraisals and inspections and things of that nature. However, if you're a veteran and you use a VA loan and you're buying a house from a veteran, they may just choose you because you have a VA loan. So don't get too discouraged if you can't do the conventional loan, but just know that that might be a hiccup when providing the offer to the sellers. The next topic is inspections. Now, in a traditional market, if it were balanced, you would have upwards of 10 calendar days to perform an inspection and then have anything remedied in terms of in writing with the seller. Well, inspections are now getting dwindled down to 3, 4, 5 day periods, and some people are foregoing inspections altogether. Now, when walking through a home, you really can get a feel of whether the home needs a lot of stuff or if it doesn't. There are some flags, and hopefully your real estate agent or realtor will be able to point some of those things out to you. But having your offer contingent on an inspection may not get you the winning bid that you want. So I'm not a big proponent of foregoing an inspection. However, you may actually perform an inspection but not have the offer contingent on it. At least this way, you know what the punch list is of the work that needs to be done in the home once you move in. If you're comfortable doing something like that, that's one thing. But foregoing an inspection altogether is not exactly advisable. You really want to just make it as convenient as possible for the seller. That way, hopefully you can win that multiple bid situation. But there are people out there that are foregoing inspections altogether. And of course, that makes the seller incredibly happy, especially if they're getting top dollar on top of it. Next, I want to talk about closing on the house with a couple of different topics. One, closing costs. In past years, a lot of buyers would build in the closing costs and have the seller pay for them. And while that's all fine and great, and sometimes you can do that now, it's really not advisable. So being able to pay your own closing costs, which means a little bit more cash, you're gonna have more cash in your pocket to pay those out at closing, is going to be a big deal. I've actually heard a couple of stories where the buyers are starting to pay the seller's closing costs, which is just crazy. Because when I started in this business, a seller almost always paid the buyer's closing costs. It would never ever happen. It's now switched. So consider maybe going above and beyond, perhaps paying their closing costs to get that win, especially if you've got the cash to do it. Now, but you really can't ask the seller to pay your closing costs any longer. Now, in terms of closing date, you have to be flexible. This is where your realtor would reach out to the listing agent and ask about, what does the seller want beyond a great financial commitment? Closing date could be one of those factors. As a matter of fact, there's a little tip where you could actually have the closing date on, say, a Wednesday, but the seller doesn't actually have to move out until Friday or Saturday. So you actually give them a way to close on the house and then take their time getting their stuff packed and moving out. That little level of convenience could be the deciding factor on winning. Next is the appraisal. So you've written the offer and you've won, but what happens if the house doesn't appraise to the market that it's supposed to? So say, for example, you bought that $350,000 house for $380,000, but there aren't any comps to support the $380,000. This is where having as much cash as possible comes in handy. Because in past years, this is where the buyer and seller would come back together and renegotiate. Perhaps the seller throws in a little bit of money and then the buyer throws in a little bit more, and you come to an agreement. But now, because we have so many bids on these houses, a seller really can just move on to the next highest bid and negotiate that appraisal out of it. So being able to come up enough to cover any appraisal issues is going to be key as well. You really don't want to get into a situation where you get cash strapped and have to negotiate the price back down because a seller may just move on to the next best buyer. Appraisals are very interesting these days because in conventional loans, they will be a little bit looser when it comes to that appraisal number. A lot of times, the appraiser, by the way, is a third party. They're not employed by the bank or the lender by any means. They're certainly not employed by you. You do pay for it, but the appraiser is there to do an unbiased market analysis on whether that home values out. There are some lenders that are foregoing appraisals, which is a little nuts. We kind of got into some issues in 2008 and 2009 with that. But that being said, when it comes to, say, FHA and VA loans, you do have separate appraisals. And that's the little strings I was talking about from the seller, that they might not be willing to deal with that because there's work orders that come along with those appraisals, being that they're federally backed loans. So if you have the ability to forego appraisal or at least make up the difference if the appraisal doesn't come in as high as the purchase price, then I highly recommend you do so. But it is something to consider and you need to be prepared for it if it happens to you. Hey, if you're enjoying this video or you're finding value in it, man, I would love it if you hit the like button. And if you have any comments, questions, concerns, leave them below. But don't forget to subscribe. And if you're looking to buy a house here in the Twin Cities or even sell it, you gotta reach out. You can call, text, email, slide into my DMs on social media, but I would love to start the conversation with you. There's one last thing that I want to talk to you about, and that's love letters. So a lot of buyers will consider writing a letter to the seller directly, stating who they are, what they're about, telling them about their family, what have you, to entice the seller to consider their offer above others. So maybe they didn't come in the highest bid, or maybe they forego an inspection, but hopefully the letter will tug on the heartstrings, and we call those love letters. Well, there's a bit of an issue with love letters because we get into potentially discriminatory practices, not only by the seller, but by the listing agent, and even by you perhaps. So depending on who the seller is, putting them in a position where they're making a choice based on something beyond your financial wherewithal to purchase the home or the terms within the offer can get a little bit dicey down the road, and you could open yourself up to a lawsuit. This has more to do with the seller side, but even on the buyer side, if you get into a multiple bid situation where they consider, all sorts of different offers, but yours was chosen because of a particular reason, you could face some issues there. So love letters are not exactly the best practice, but they are very common. This is Minneapolis Living. I really appreciate you watching. Please stay safe, please stay healthy, and I'll see you next time.